Finally on the programme today, the name Randall Wallace might not immediately be familiar to you, but his films certainly will be. He's the man behind blockbusters like Braveheart, Pearl Harbor and We Were Soldiers. And if you were to go to East Belfast to a new memorial garden there, you would also find that the Hollywood director has a special link with it. He gave permission for a hymn that he wrote to be used in the memorial garden at Tullycarnet. I spoke to him yesterday from his home in Hollywood, California, and he told me why he got involved with the project.
I was deeply honored to be asked about this. I first of all have an admiration for his work. I've heard that he's one of the best in the world. When my sons have Irish heritage, I'm mainly Scottish, but heritage. But I had heard that Ross wanted to do this, and I researched him some, and I wrote a letter to my sons and said I understand he's the best artist in Ireland, which probably makes him the best artist in the world. So I was honored that he would want to do this. And I also have a peculiar fondness for the families of soldiers. I'm not sure exactly why. I was not a soldier, nor was my father, but I believe their sacrifice is transcendent. And I was deeply honored that he would consider using the words to Mansion to the Lord on this.
It's an enormously powerful hymn with very, very powerful words as well, which you wrote to the music. Was that special feeling that you have for the soldiers and the families of those soldiers, what was really behind this then?
Yes, and there was an even more personal connection about this. I believe that that soldiers are not just the ones who pick up rifles and face artillery. They're the ones who do that, who fight for what they believe and stand in peril of their lives in everyday life. I had written this during the making of the movie We Were Soldiers, and my father had just died. My father died on the notorious September 11th, having nothing to do with the terrorist events, but that was the day he passed away, and we were just finishing up the movie We Were Soldiers. And my editor, William Hoy, had said to me, we need a hymn for the end of We Were Soldiers. That seems to be the best kind of music for that. And there was no requiem hymn for the U.S. Army. We researched it, and there is a hymn for the U.S. Navy, which is Eternal Father, Strong to Save, which dates, I believe, all the way back to the British Navy. But we had no hymn for our Army. And my composer, Nick Glennie Smith, had written some exquisite music for We Were Soldiers, and I asked Nick to write a hymn, and he came back the next day with a beautiful melody, and I picked up a sheet of paper and in maybe 10 minutes wrote these words. I realized at the time I was writing about my father, as well as the men that we had made the movie We Were Soldiers about. And it had the feeling of hymns that I had heard all my life as a boy growing up in the South. So that all of that resonated at once with me in writing these words.
So it's hugely personal for you, really, which fits in, I suppose, particularly well with the situation in which it's now being used in East Belfast, where on the one hand it's reflecting those local people and their struggles through what we call the Troubles here, but it's also looking at local people from there who sacrificed their lives in both of the world wars and in other global conflicts.
Yes, and As I say, I have a particular affinity for the people of Ireland and the people of Scotland, and of course, dating back to Braveheart and to my own roots. It seems to me, not that we can judge things based on traditions and cultures necessarily, but those particular cultures have an aspect of living in which everything is done from the heart, and that's what draws me to them. We made Braveheart largely in Ireland, and the spirit of people who long for anything and are willing to struggle for it is ennobling. We all have to judge the causes we struggle for, but the fact that we are willing to struggle and sacrifice, I believe, leads us to something higher and nobler, and I believe that's an underlying theme of Mansions of the Lord.
What was your reaction when you heard it was to be used for President Reagan's funeral?
I was humbled. At first I didn't believe it, and I was on a trip and was actually speaking at a church in Chicago, Willow Creek Church it's called, and it's a large new style of church. It's what they call seeker-friendly, very warm and casual in its openness. One of those churches that seeks to draw people who have been somehow feeling disenfranchised by traditional church styles, but their theology is certainly mainstream. And I was there to speak at an arts festival, and I received an email that the National Cathedral had announced that the closing music of Ronald Reagan's funeral would be Mansions of the Lord. And I was still reeling from the loss of my father. It was one of those things, I don't think anyone knows what it is to lose a father until they lose one. There's a peculiar affinity among all those who have, and I was still in that place in which it was trouble for me to think of my father, because I didn't want to get emotional in public, and I heard that they were going to do this, and it was going to be the very day that I had heard about it. So I looked for a television set and found one. Some of the people who were working at the arts festival found a television set in one of the offices of the church, and we went down together and were watching it, and it was quite an emotional moment for me to see them. The honor guard come down and lift the president's body, and then the Marine Corps chorus began to sing Mansions of the Lord. It was I live on words, but I had trouble finding the words to describe that moment.
I can imagine. Do you think you might come and see this memorial of Ross's sometime?
I absolutely will come. I'm really overwhelmed with the thought that Ross Wilson has chosen to engrave those words on such a beautiful memorial and such a beautiful place. And I've been looking for a chance to go back to Ireland, and this will give me a wonderful excuse to do it.
Just a couple of other things, if I could ask you, Randall. You were talking about Braveheart, which I know you wrote, and you mentioned your Scots heritage. Any relation, William Wallace?
I am absolutely convinced that I'm a descendant of William Wallace, and I can't prove it, but nobody can prove I'm not. So I freely claim that I am.
And just one other thing, we were watching the trailer for your new picture. I mean, everyone will remember Braveheart and Pearl Harbor, We Were Soldiers, and the Man in the Iron Mask. The new one, Secretariat, coming out in the autumn. That's another really kind of heart-tugging story, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a story about profound courage, both on the part of the horse, and particularly in human terms on the part of the woman who owned him. And I'm really excited about this film in that it portrays what we were talking about in terms of Mansions of the Lord, the courage that may not be on the battlefield, but on in a war of a different kind, a war inside oneself. The woman who owned Secretariat stood against all of the mechanisms of life. Her husband didn't believe in her. The people that she did business with didn't believe in her. She found herself running a horse breeding business when her father was ill and her mother had passed away, and she found she had a talent for it, and she produced the greatest racehorse arguably who has ever lived, and she refused to sell out. She refused to give in, and it's a really stirring story, and everyone in a family can go see it. There are people who admire Braveheart and who saw it once but don't want to see it again because of the sheer physical suffering portrayed in the movie. There are those who feel that way about We Were Soldiers and Pearl Harbor, perhaps, but everyone in the family will come and will be able to come and appreciate this movie without even children, without being bothered by what's in it. But it's a thoroughly adult movie as well, so I'm really excited about it.
The movie he's talking about, Secretariat, the name there. Randall Wallace, film director, producer and writer, and that new movie stars Diane Lane. Looks pretty good, actually. And the memorial is in Tullycarnet in East Belfast, put together, of course, by Ross Wilson, who he was talking about there, and Randall Wallace's words on it.